Today I have the assets panel to show, and right now there are two assets loaded, a cube and the soldier mesh from a game I had worked on previously. Now, these are not icons that were generated by the artist using Photoshop or Maya. Actually, the editor generates these on the fly, and what it does is it loads the mesh for each of the assets and renders it to an off-screen buffer. Once that off-screen buffer is rendered, and it's very small, it's about 256 pixels by 256 pixels, I copy over the video memory from the off-screen buffer to system memory. So what I'm left with is an array of RGB channels for the rendered image. That array of channels I then load up into a UI icon, which I then display in the editor. The good thing about that is the artist doesn't need to create an icon file either in Maya and Photoshop and provide that to the editor. They simply generate the mesh, export it using the Maya plugin, and I'll take care of the rest for them. And that's great for the artist because the less they need to worry about, the better. They have enough on their plate as it is. Now, it loaded the cube and the skinny mesh, and you remember wondering, how did it do that? How did it know to load these things? And the way I do that is by creating an asset file or a .ass file. And you can see those here. There's a cube.ass file and a soldier.ass file, and they're in the assets directory. They're simply text files that describe the assets the artist wishes to load. For example, here we have the soldier file, which has this display name, which is skinny, the mesh, which is the soldier.msh file, and the asset type, which is an entity. So that's how the artist will get assets into this tab. They just write up a text file, and the editor picks it up, parses it, and loads what the artist wants. Now, the assets are located in this directory, but it's not hard-coded. It could be anywhere. The way I do the loading is I use a resource file or a .res file, and one of these files is the common .res file, which I'm showing here. Now, this file is automatically loaded by the editor because it has common assets that are used throughout the levels. And in order for it to load the asset files, I've put this command here, the asset dir, and it's basically saying load all the .ass files in the asset directory. So that's how it knows to go to that directory and load these files. And there's also an unload resources section, which will be called when you close the editor. You can also load specific materials, compositors, fonts, and there's other things, animations, meshes, what have you. This one is just for the common resources of the editor. Another thing I've done, if I show the project settings, is I'll allow you to create your own project-specific resource file that gets loaded when you load that particular project. So for example, if you have a winter level, you will have a winter level resource file which will load specific assets for that project. That way, when you have the winter level, you won't have jungle-based assets showing up in the panel when all you need is winter-based level assets. And that'll reduce the number of asset icons that show up here, and it'll just make it easier for the artist to focus on the task at hand. I also have a search function, so eventually if you have 200 assets, you can search for specific assets. So if I type right there, it'll pick up on the skinny asset, and you can also clear it and go back to what you had. So it's dynamic, and it'll filter things as you go along and type. So right now I also have the drag and drop events working. However, I haven't completed the rendering of the meshes yet, so that's what's next on my plate, and when I complete that, I'll have another video. Thanks!